I remember the day clearly. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that seemed to shine exclusively on the wealthy. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the faint sound of laughter floated through the sprawling estate. My family was gathered for our annual summer barbecue, a masquerade of smiles and pleasantries where everyone pretended that the weight of their riches did not create an insurmountable divide among us. I was actually excited about that day. Although I knew my dreams of entrepreneurship would raise an eyebrow or two among my family, I was determined to hold my ground. I had poured my heart into a small business idea that was beginning to take shape in my mind, and I was finally ready to share it. Unfortunately, I didn't anticipate the crushing reality of the response that awaited me. As I stood by the grill flipping burgers and trying to blend in, Claire, my older sister, glided in like royalty. Dressed in a designer sundress, she radiated the confidence of someone who had always been considered the favorite. There was a glimmer in her eye that made me uneasy, a predatory gleam that hinted she was ready to pounce. I had always felt overshadowed by her accomplishments, her charm, and her polished life, but that day would be the day she decided to publicly remind me just how beneath her I truly was. "Alex," she called out, her voice dripping with mock excitement as she approached. "Are you finally done dreaming up those ridiculous ideas of yours? I mean, how many times will it take for you to realize you're not cut out for business?" Laughter erupted around us, sharp, stinging, and completely unnecessary. It was as if she had orchestrated my public execution and everyone else was in on the plan. The chuckles of my family members echoed painfully, hitting me like arrows. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, my stomach tightening in a knot as humiliation washed over me. The casual cruelty of her words cut deeper than the laughter that followed. Claire had never held back, and each jab had built up a wall of resentment and vulnerability that I carried like a heavy cloak, one that grew leaden with every laugh she provoked. If you've ever been underestimated by family, you'll understand every part of what happened next, I thought to myself, just trying to survive that moment. I glanced at my father, who stood a few feet away, engaged in pleasant conversation with his business partners. He glanced over briefly, a faint frown crossing his face, but then turned back to his guests, dismissing my embarrassment as quickly as he had noticed it. At that moment, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was nothing but a joke to him, just as I was to Claire. "Maybe it's time you put those dreams aside and focus on what you're good at, Alex," Claire continued, her voice rising, clearly enjoying the game. "Like being a good little brother, stick to what you know." Struggling to keep my composure, I forced a smile, hoping to project an air of nonchalance. But inside, I could feel the walls closing in. I had always been the little brother, constantly compared to the golden child who could do no wrong. Claire had always been the one to receive accolades from our parents, the one who had everything handed to her on a silver platter. It was a dynamic I knew all too well, one that made my heart ache every time she gleefully reminded me of my shortcomings. As the laughter faded and the crowd dispersed, I retreated to the corner of the backyard. The cool touch of a nearby tree brought a moment of solace, but it did little to soothe the gnawing sense of defeat. I felt trapped in a world where dreams were scoffed at and aspirations were met with scorn. I was painfully aware that Claire's view of success, the only one that mattered in our family, was entirely alien to mine. I glanced back at the gathering, watching as my father praised Claire for her latest business venture, her every success consistently celebrated, while I remained invisible. It was a continuous cycle of belittlement disguised as tough love, and I was growing weary of it. Claire's words echoed in my head, "Stop dreaming." It stung, but it also ignited something within me, a flicker of defiance. In that moment, I made a silent vow to myself. No longer would I let my sister's belittling remarks dictate my worth. I needed to find a way to change the narrative, to prove to not only Claire but to my entire family that my dreams mattered. I took a deep breath, allowing the determination to wash over me like a cleansing wave. Little did I know, what Claire didn't realize was the potential that was brewing beneath the surface of my quiet demeanor. I had started to gather information, resources, and a network that could challenge her reign in our family. Each belittling moment in my life was transforming into fuel for my ambitions, a way to rise strong from the ashes of my humiliation. As I stepped away from the tree, I felt a new resolve building inside me. This incident was just the beginning. The stakes were high in our family, and the toxic favoritism I faced would only serve to strengthen my ambition. Claire was convinced she had put me in my place, but I was ready to rewrite my story. The next chapter would be mine to write, one where I wouldn't be defined by my sister's cruelty or my father's cold indifference. But first, I had to navigate the treacherous waters of my family dynamics, where every encounter was laden with judgment and ridicule. I couldn't yet see how the boardroom, the very seat of power that my father occupied, would soon turn its gaze toward me. All I knew was that I was done being the family's punchline. As the sun began to set, casting shadows over the yard, I felt a tension rising within me. I was ready to break free from the chains of expectations that had held me captive for too long. The whispers of doubt faded with the sunlight. It was now time to step into the light of my own aspirations. And little did I know, this was merely the beginning of my journey, a journey that would lead me to redefine not only my worth but challenge the entire narrative of my family. The humiliation I faced that day was not the end. It was just the prelude to a much grander performance that was yet to unfold. My family, unbeknownst to them, was about to discover the depths of my potential and the dreams I would not let die. As I leaned against the tree, the laughter from the barbecue faded into the background, and the reality of my situation began to sink in deeper. I had always been the ghost in my family's grand, opulent mansion, a shadow in the light of Claire's brilliance. It wasn't just her words that stung, it was the knowledge that she had my parents wrapped around her finger, their unwavering adoration for her achievements casting a pall over my own existence. I looked around, taking in the scene. My mother, radiant in her designer attire, chatting animatedly with guests, her laughter ringing out like chimes in the wind. She always had a way of making the world revolve around her. My father, too, seemed oblivious to the pain he helped inflict, his attention solely focused on his empire. The gleaming cars in the driveway and the sprawling grounds were symbols of their success, but they came at a cost I felt in every comparison, every backhanded compliment, every moment I was reminded of my inadequacies. I turned my gaze back to Claire, who was now surrounded by admirers, her charm effortlessly captivating the room. It was a game to her, and I was merely a pawn. The more I watched her thrive in our parents' spotlight, the more I felt the weight of my own ambitions crumble. I had spent years working on ideas, dreaming up plans for a business that could carve my own identity. Yet every time I shared a glimpse of those dreams, it was met with ridicule and condescension. The knife twisted deeper when I recalled the countless conversations I had overheard between my parents. They often spoke in hushed tones about the family business, their voices low and conspiratorial as they discussed investments and financial maneuvers. I had always assumed that their interests were based solely on securing a future for us as a family. But as I pieced together the fragments of those conversations, I realized it was more than that. They had a grip on my future, controlling not just the financial resources but the very narrative of who I was allowed to be. What stung the most was the realization that my parents had never truly believed in my potential. Instead, they had only ever seen me as an extension of their wealth, a vehicle for their legacy. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My heart raced and I clenched my fists, feeling the heat of frustration bubbling beneath my skin. I had allowed their disdain to shape my reality for far too long. With every passing moment, I could feel the shame and humiliation morph into something else: determination. I had been living in the shadow of a family that thrived on belittling my dreams, but I was done cowering. I was tired of being the underdog, the little brother who could never measure up. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the reality that I had the power to change this narrative. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Claire's laughter, piercing through the haze of my resolve. She had turned her attention to me once more, her eyes glimmering with the thrill of competition. "What's wrong, Alex? Did I hurt your feelings?" she called out with a smirk, her words laced with malice. The crowd of family and friends turned to me, waiting for a response, their faces a mask of feigned concern and hidden glee. "Why would I be hurt?" I shot back, surprising myself. My voice was steadier than I felt, a tremor of defiance creeping into my tone. "I'm just realizing that being stuck in your shadow isn't a fate I want for myself." Gasps rippled through the audience, and I caught a glimpse of shock on my parents' faces. For once, I could see their carefully constructed facade begin to crack. Claire's expression twisted in disbelief, and the laughter that had once surrounded her faded into an uncomfortable silence. But the moment was fleeting. Before I could bask in my small victory, I felt my father's presence looming behind me. "Enough of this nonsense, Alex," he said, his voice dripping with authority. "You need to understand your place in this family." His words hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the unspoken rules that governed our lives. I felt my heart sink, but I refused to let him see how much his words affected me. "My place, or the place you've decided for me," I retorted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Don't make a scene," he snapped, stepping closer, his brow furrowed with anger. "Your sister is the one we've invested in, you need to respect that." His dismissive tone ignited a fire within me. I had spent years feeling like a failure in their eyes, but perhaps I wasn't the one who needed to change. I searched for my mother's gaze, desperate for a sign of support, but her eyes were cast downward, avoiding the confrontation. I realized then that I was utterly alone in this fight. The realization hit me hard, and my resolve solidified. If my own family wouldn't stand by me, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. As I turned away from the crowd, I felt a surge of determination. I didn't know how I would do it, but I would find a way to take control of my life. I would no longer be the underdog in their rich narrative. I would rise above the toxicity that had defined my existence for too long. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of my journey, an awakening that would lead me to uncover the hidden truths about my family, the financial strings that bound me, and the power I had yet to unleash. The fight for my identity had just begun, and I was ready to take a stand against the very people who tried to keep me down. And as I walked away from the barbecue, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was ready for the challenge ahead, ready to confront the demons of my family's expectations and finally claim my place, not as the failure they envisioned, but as someone who had the potential to thrive. The weight of my father's disappointment hung in the air like a storm cloud threatening to burst. I could feel Claire's mocking gaze on me, her triumph palpable as she soaked in the shock of the crowd. For the first time I had spoken up, but now I was left to grapple with the aftermath. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, the cacophony of laughter and chatter from the barbecue a distant echo. I took a step back, feeling the cool bark of the tree against my back. "Alex," my father said, his voice low but edged with authority, "this isn't the time for your childish outbursts." I felt the familiar sting of humiliation wash over me, and my instincts screamed at me to back down. But something within me shifted. I no longer wanted to be the family's punching bag, the one who was easily dismissed. I had ideas, aspirations, and talents I had never unveiled. As I walked away from the crowd, my thoughts ignited with a sense of purpose. I needed to channel this turmoil into something constructive. I needed to reclaim my narrative. In the quiet of my room later that night, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen. It was time to put my ideas into action. I had been secretly working on an app for months, something that could revolutionize the way people interacted with technology. It was a unique concept, and I had poured my heart and mind into its development during the late hours when everyone else was asleep. I had kept it hidden, not only from my family but from the world, fearing their ridicule and dismissal. But now it felt like the perfect moment to resurrect my dreams. I logged into my development platform, the familiar interface lighting up like a beacon of hope. My fingers moved deftly over the keyboard and ideas flowed like a river. The app was not just a project, it was my escape, my way out of the constraints of my family's expectations. It was a tool that could make me financially independent, a chance to finally step out of the shadows and into the limelight. Days turned into weeks and my determination only strengthened. During the day, I would put on a facade of compliance, pretending to be the dutiful son while secretly pouring every ounce of my energy into coding and design. I watched Claire from a distance, her confidence shining through in her every move, but instead of feeling envy, I felt a burning resolve to prove I was more than just Alex, the lesser sibling. I was Alex, the innovator. Then came the fateful day. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my family had gathered to celebrate Claire's latest achievement, an award for her contributions to our father's business. I had deliberately chosen to retreat to my room, working on the final touches of my app. Just as I was about to test its functionality, I overheard voices from the living room. The conversation escalated into a heated debate, and I couldn't resist eavesdropping. I'm telling you, it's time we expand our services, Claire said, her voice dripping with determination. If we don't innovate, we'll fall behind. I've got some ideas that could really take us to the next level. Really, Claire? My father's voice boomed with skepticism. What do you know about innovation? You're just good at spinning the old ideas. Excuse me, she snapped back, the tension palpable. I've been working hard and you know it, you just don't want to see it. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of connection with Claire. We were both fighting for our places, yet our methods couldn't have been more different. I had chosen the path of creation while she clung to her inherited status. But that thought quickly evaporated as my father's voice sliced through the air again. I've invested too much into this family business to let your whims dictate its future, he said. That was the breaking point for me. I could feel the anger boiling inside as I realized they were all still trapped in their cycles of manipulation and favoritism. Claire may have been the golden child, but I was about to change the game. Fueled by adrenaline, I stormed down the hallway and into the living room. The atmosphere shifted as my family turned to face me, surprise etched across their faces. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down, but this time I stood firm. You all think you control the narrative, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos within. But you have no idea what I'm capable of. I've been working on something that will change everything. Claire's eyebrows shot up and the room fell into a hush. What are you talking about, Alex? She asked, incredulity dripping from her words. I'm talking about my app, I declared. The project you've dismissed as a childish fantasy. It's not just an idea, it's a revolutionary tool that could disrupt everything you think you know about the family business. The silence hung thick in the air, punctuated only by the sound of my parents shifting in their seats. My mother's eyes widened in shock while my father's expression hardened. You think you can just waltz in here and claim to have something worthwhile? He sneered. But I pressed on, driven by a surge of confidence. Yes, I do. And I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you that I will stand on my own 2 feet, and if you don't believe in me now, you will soon enough. The confrontation felt electric, crackling with tension as my family's facade began to crack under the weight of my revelation. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in my father's eyes, a hint of uncertainty as he grasped the implications of my words. Claire, feigning indifference, smirked. Good luck with that, little brother. Just remember, the world is tougher than you think. But her words no longer held power over me. I had crossed a line and there was no turning back. In that moment, I knew my potential was not just a dream to be dismissed. The hidden talents I had nurtured were ready to rise, and I was prepared to claim my place, not just as a member of the family but as a force to be reckoned with. The next step would be critical. I needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the board, the moment when they would realize that the underdog was finally ready to fight back. No longer would I be seen as the lesser sibling. I was ready to step into my own light. As I left the room, I felt a sense of empowerment swell within me. It was time to unveil my creation to the world, to show my family that I was capable of greatness. I was tired of living in their shadows, and I was determined to illuminate my own path. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to embrace it head-on. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. The family meeting was scheduled for that Saturday, and every nerve in my body buzzed with anticipation. I had invited myself into the lion's den, but this time I wasn't going to be the prey. As I walked into the conference room, my heart raced, but my resolve was ironclad. I could feel the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me, but I was ready to unveil the truth. Claire sat at the head of the table, her demeanor exuding confidence as she flipped through a sleek presentation. My parents were seated beside her, their eyes filled with the same pride they always reserved for their golden child. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was my moment. Thanks for gathering today, I started, my voice steadier than I felt. I have something important to share. The room fell silent, and I could see the curiosity flicker in their eyes. I've been working on an app for the last several months, I continued, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. It's designed to revolutionize communication and productivity in ways that haven't been explored yet. Claire's expression shifted from curiosity to skepticism. Really, Alex, an app? We don't need another half-baked idea from you. The familiar sting of her derision attempted to pierce my newfound confidence, but I pressed on. I'm not here to ask for your approval, I shot back, feeling the fire ignite within me. I'm here to tell you that this app is already in its final testing phase and I'm ready to launch it. The tension in the room thickened. My parents exchanged glances, their disbelief palpable. What do you mean you're ready to launch? My father asked, his skepticism apparent. You've always been the dreamer, Alex. This isn't a fairy tale. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. Actually, it is a fairy tale, I replied, my voice steady, and I'm the one holding the pen. You see, while you all have been focused on Claire's achievements, I've been quietly funding our family business from behind the scenes. The room erupted in gasps, and Claire's face twisted with shock. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice rising. You can't be serious. I am serious, I replied, feeling the adrenaline surging through my veins. The investments I made in the family business are substantial. I've been the silent partner, supporting you all while you dismissed my talents and aspirations. I've been building my own wealth, and I'm the one who's been keeping this family afloat without you even knowing. My father's face darkened. You're lying, you've never had the means to do this without our support. I've been saving and investing my earnings from freelance work, I explained, my confidence solidifying with each word. I've built a portfolio that you never thought I was capable of. This isn't just about the app, it's about the reality that I'm more than just your overlooked son. Claire's expression shifted from disbelief to anger. You think you can just waltz in here and take credit for everything? You've always been the underdog, and I won't let you steal my spotlight. I shook my head, realizing the futility of her attempts to belittle my achievements. This isn't about stealing your spotlight, Claire. This is about finally taking my place at the table. You've had the privilege of being the favorite, but I'm here to show you that I can stand on my own 2 feet. The room was electric with tension, and I could see my parents' expressions softening, the realization dawning on them. You're serious, my mother finally said, her voice trembling with a mix of admiration and disbelief. You've really been doing this. Yes, and it's time for you to acknowledge my contributions, I replied, feeling a surge of power. I'm not just Alex anymore, I'm an innovator and I'm ready to take the reins. As I spoke, I could see Claire's facade cracking. The confidence she had exuded moments ago was slipping away, replaced by a flicker of fear. The dynamic that had long favored her began to shift, and I could feel the tide turning. I have legal ownership of the app and my investments in the family business, I continued, my voice steady. You've manipulated the narrative for too long, and it's time for the truth to come to light. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's gaze was intense, searching my face for signs of doubt, but there were none. I was standing firm, no longer the boy who had been dismissed and belittled. I was ready to reclaim my narrative. Finally, my father spoke, his tone softer than I had ever heard it. Alex, I had no idea. I'm sorry for not believing in you. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. You've proven me wrong, and I respect that. Claire's expression was a mixture of rage and disbelief. This isn't over, Alex. You'll regret this, she spat, but I could see the tremor in her voice. The power dynamic had shifted, and she was no longer the untouchable golden child. I won't regret it, I replied, my voice unwavering. I'm taking control of my life now. This is the beginning of a new chapter for me, and I won't be silenced again. As the meeting concluded, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had confronted my family, revealed my truth, and claimed my power. It was a moment of poetic justice, a turning point in my life. I was no longer the underestimated son. I was Alex, the innovator, the one who had finally stepped into the light. In the weeks that followed, I launched my app, and the response was overwhelming. People resonated with my vision, and I found myself in a position I had only dreamed of. I began to redefine my relationships with my family, establishing boundaries that had long been absent. My parents, now aware of my capabilities, offered their support, but I was careful to maintain my independence. In the end, I learned that true wealth isn't just about financial success. It's about self-worth, respect, and the courage to stand up for oneself. I had transformed from the overlooked son into a force to be reckoned with, proving that dreams are worth pursuing, no matter how unattainable they may seem. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more stories where the underdog finally gets the justice they deserve.